Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Tickets Please. I'm your host, Josiah Wampfler. After some time away, we're back, and I'll be diving into some releases over the last couple of months. We'll start with a review of director Alex Garland's vision of an America torn apart by political violence, Civil War. Does the UK director's film offer a worthwhile critique of where American politics may be heading? Then I'll review the action-revenge film Monkey Man. Does Dev Patel's directorial debut show promise for the young filmmaker, and how well does its political message shine through? Finally, I have witnessed director George Miller's Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. Is this prequel a worthy addition to the series, and does it add to the mythology set up in Mad Max Fury Road? That is all ahead on this episode of Two Tickets Please. So let's start by discussing Civil War. Filmmaker Alex Garland is responsible for some incredible cinema. As a screenwriter, he gave us 28 Days Later and Dread. His first two films as a director, Ex Machina and Annihilation, are two of my favorite films of the last decade. So I was quite intrigued by the prospect of his newest film, Civil War, which sees him eschewing the sci-fi genre to deliver a warning about American political polarization through a film about an imagined civil conflict and the war reporters working to cover it. Unfortunately, while Civil War is certainly a film that inspires much thought and discussion, after seeing it, I think the British director should go back to sci-fi and never touch American politics again. Civil War, contrary to what the title may evoke, is not a film interested in the particulars of this second American Civil War, the major power players in it, or its military battles. Instead, it's a film exclusively about a group of journalists reporting on it. These journalists, legendary photojournalist Lee Smith, played by Kirsten Dunst, Reuters reporter and adrenaline junkie Joel, played by Wagner Moura, veteran New York Times journalist Sammy, played by Stephen Henderson, and aspiring young photographer Jesse Cullen, played by Kaylee Spaney, they don't seem to be doing a lot of actual reporting in Garland's film. Despite encountering several vital stories along the way, the group pursues their main objective with a singular focus. That objective is to score an interview with the embattled president in Washington, D.C. as secessionist forces close in on the city. Unfortunately, if you're looking for more details on this confusing conflict, you won't find many more in Garland's film. While technically brilliant and truly fascinating, Civil War is irredeemably flawed because of Garland's script, which posits borderline nonsensical political alliances, lacks depth in its world building, and shortchanges its reasonably interesting characters. It raises intriguing ideas about political violence, the job of war reporting, and whether images of war that journalists capture actually make a difference. But Garland seems uninterested in fully pulling on many of these compelling threads he's set up. I don't like to rely too much on authorial intent because at the end of the day, art is in the eye of the beholder. But Civil War is impossible to truly parse without considering Garland's intention. The references to Full Metal Jacket and Come and See are quite obvious. Garland's film is intended to be an anti-war film about a conflict that has not yet come to pass. It's meant to be a warning against continuing down the path of extreme political polarization we find ourselves on. There's no such thing as an anti-war film, legendary director Francois Truffaut once said, speaking to the near-impossible task of negatively portraying images of war in cinema, a medium that almost inherently gives these images entertainment value. This is true for many war films, as they chase the entertainment and function as propaganda for whatever side they choose to make the heroes. Garland's inspirations, Full Metal Jacket and Come and See, are two films that stand in defiance of Truffaut's supposition. Both films attempt to disturb their audiences with their violent imagery instead of entertaining them. And most importantly, both films clearly define the sides of their conflicts and have a moral viewpoint. A true anti-war film doesn't just say war is bad. It seeks to dissuade its audience from the allure of blood-soaked patriotism, complicate the hero-villain dynamic we try to place on war, and ultimately contend with the politics and ideologies driving the conflict. Garland's intention may have been anti-war, but his film is not. Again, it's Garland's refusal to give us necessary details about this conflict that scuttle its anti-war intentions. It's silly to think that war is never necessary. In fact, within the context of this film, it would seem that a civil conflict is entirely necessary to defeat a fascist president. So it's important to understand the contours of this civil war in order to parse not good guys and bad guys, but whether actions being taken can be justified as necessary. Plus, considering that this is Garland's dire warning to Americans of where our politics may lead, the film would be much more effective if we could actually draw lines to real-world dynamics, political parties, figures, etc. People immediately butt up against the alliance between Texas and California because it doesn't make any sense to us within our current political landscape. It is a provocative choice, Garland has said, meant to question why we believe that partisan politics would matter more to these states than a fascist president. But it is a provocation without a sensible goal. Since we know next to nothing about the political alignment of Nick Offerman's fascist president, it gives us two very dumb options. If the president is aligned with the Republican Party, we can easily imagine that Texas Republicans would have few qualms backing him. Just look at any of their statements on the January 6th insurrection. If he's a Democrat, I would be more willing to accept that California Democrats would oppose him, but what is Garland saying with that? Despite any issues people may have with the Democratic Party, and there are certainly many, they aren't actively engaged in anti-democracy rhetoric or actions like, say, the Republicans are. The world building here is just so damn thin, which would be less of a problem if the film were not intended to be a grand statement on current American politics. But given that it is, how are we supposed to find a coherent reading when we have such little context? It seems that Garland tried to make his film as apolitical as possible in order to be all things to all people. But in doing that, he also made a film that has very little to say. An anti-war film, I believe, requires a solid worldview. And I would describe Garland's blinkered worldview as why can't we all be friends centrist brain rot. Crass, I know, but it is a worldview that refuses to engage with what I think is an unavoidable truth. In a political landscape where one party has lurched so far to the right, moderation and bipartisanship are untenable, because they inherently demand an acceptance of a large swath of a right-wing project that is anti-democracy. Instead of needed context, Garland only offers allusions to words, symbols, and dynamics we may recognize. The fascist president has taken a third term and dissolved the FBI, things that may be signaling to Trump. Some of the forces the journalists encounter seem driven by xenophobia, but those forces don't seem to be aligned with the president. Plus, there are the absurd references to Portland Maoists and an Antifa massacre that were so stupid I laughed out loud in the theater. It all adds up to a cowardly, opaque film that allows Garland's audience to easily graft their own political enemies onto his bad guys and ultimately take delight in the violence perpetrated against them. I wouldn't call that an anti-war film. But what does Civil War tell us about journalism? Here we also have problems. Many critics have hailed Civil War as a film about the importance of wartime journalism, but I can't really square that with the film that I saw. After the journalists stumble upon blatant war crimes, Garland fails to actually show his journalists doing any real reporting. Instead of filing stories about those crimes, they press on to Washington to get their pointless interview. In addition, no one in the group is concerned with recording video for some reason, and Jessie is exclusively using a film camera, meaning that her images are more likely to be out of focus and could easily be destroyed by the elements. Garland's journalists are not only bad at their jobs, though, they also seem to be borderline sociopaths. Lee is as cold and unfeeling as they come, hardened by the things she has witnessed over her career. Her most important line, "We record so other people can ask questions," also echoes Garland's centrist worldview in which journalists may never take a side, even if that side is against blatant evil. Joel and his colleagues that he comes across are framed as adrenaline junkies, taking perverse pleasure in the things they are witnessing. And though Jessie starts out as a naive, moralistic young woman, she ends the film just as craven as the rest, perhaps more so. At one point in the film, Joel and Jessie are watching a battle light up the night sky some distance away. "That gunfire is making me extremely effing hard," Joel exclaims. It recalls the words spoken by NBC News anchor Brian Williams in 2017. President Trump had just launched a volley of missiles at Syria, and many were fearful we may be on the verge of yet another war in the Middle East. As Williams looked upon the images, he quoted a Leonard Cohen song, saying, "I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons." It is a fitting allusion because I think it speaks quite well to Garland's worldview, from which most of Civil War's problems come. The lyric comes from Cohen's 1988 song, "First We Take Manhattan," and Cohen described it as a song about the allure of the extreme and the danger in that allure. In a 1993 interview, when talking about the line, he spoke about his fascination with extreme positions and his fight to resist them. "I felt for some time that the motivating energy or the engrossing energy available to us today is the energy coming from the extremes. That's why we have Malcolm X. And somehow, it's only these extremist positions that can compel our attention." Garland on the Civil War press tour said something related when talking about the political polarization in America. "Left and right are ideological arguments on how to run a state, but we've made it into good and bad. We've made it into a moral issue, and it's effing idiotic and incredibly dangerous." Well, I find Garland's assertion that there is no moral difference between the American left and right, as well as Cohen's assertion that Malcolm X was some dangerous extremist to be resisted, effing idiotic. What the American government does with its power is a moral issue, and we can actually denote what are good and bad policy choices. In American politics, supposedly extremist positions on the left include things like universal health care, prison abolition, queer rights, protections for immigrants, and full access to abortion. Meanwhile, extremist positions on the right include a full ban on abortion and trans health care, whittling away at our meager social safety net, opposition to civil rights protections for minority groups, and the push to undermine our very democratic process. If Malcolm X was the extremist in his day on the left, George Wallace was a counterexample on the right. And I think the morality of their positions is pretty clear. If this country is once again pulled into a civil conflict, it will not be because the left could not find common ground with the right. Right-wing politicians like Donald Trump, who have stoked racist and reactionary sentiment in order to undermine our democratic institutions, will be to blame. During America's original Civil War, President Lincoln didn't seek a moderate position, but attacked the cancer at the heart of the country by completely ending the abhorrent institution of slavery. Unfortunately, after the war, his successors once again sought unity over justice and let the cancer of segregation live for another 100 years. With the rise of a new reactionary movement that seeks to pull us back from the progress we have made, we are once again facing a crisis. Will we seek unity or justice? Will we compromise with those who don't believe in democracy or fight against them? Civil War offers no solutions and asks the wrong questions. It may be a work of tremendous filmmaking, but it is ultimately soulless and empty. Alex Garland, I beg of you, please go back to England and stop lecturing us about American politics. I'm giving Civil War 2.5 out of 5 stars. It is currently available on VOD. The road to Dev Patel's directorial debut, Monkey Man, was a long and complicated one. After finally getting the financing, production was nearly canceled due to the pandemic. Then, after production was moved from India to Indonesia, filming was again stopped when Patel broke his hand, forcing them to change all of his fight choreography to compensate. They completed production in 2021 and sold the film to Netflix. But the streamer quickly sought a way out as they were concerned that the film's blatant political message would threaten their distribution in India. Eventually, Jordan Peele came aboard as a producer and convinced Universal to purchase the film for distribution. So it is no surprise to say that Monkey Man is a bit of a Frankenstein's monster, undergoing years of work in the edit with notes coming in from multiple different studios. Some of those notes were detrimental to the film's effectiveness, like the cowardly decision to change the color scheme of the film's villainous political party from orange to red in order to make it less obvious that Patel is drawing a parallel to the ruling BJP party in India. But despite some of those compromises, it seems Peele's presence helped polish the film into an overall exciting and entertaining experience that still packs a powerful punch. Monkey Man centers on Kid, played by Patel, a young Indian man who is seeking revenge on those responsible for his mother's murder during a police raid that expelled his village from their land when he was young. Those two men and the primary villains of this action revenge tale are spiritual guru and politician Baba Shakti and police chief Rana Singh. Working as a monkey-masked fighter at an underground club on the side, Kid infiltrates a luxury nightclub that Chief Singh frequents, planning to take his revenge. But revenge tales are never clean, and Kid soon learns that he will need additional help to succeed, and in the process grows to understand the broader political struggle he is a part of. Monkey Man is definitely a bit rough for Patel's first film out the door, but it is an entertaining ride, and I think it shows a ton of promise for him as a director as well as an action star. There are some truly brilliant action sequences, the first brawl in the nightclub chief among them, where Patel shows real talent for directing action and an exciting willingness to seek unconventional framing that makes his movie look and feel quite different from a lot of other action films. You can tell he isn't just shooting coverage and editing it together later, but had a specific vision for how he wanted to move us through the action. Unfortunately, though, it's obvious he didn't include enough wide shots in that vision, and ran into trouble in the edit because of that. Several action sequences in Monkey Man become incredibly claustrophobic and confusing to watch because of how tight the camera sticks to the action. And even outside the action scenes, Patel seems allergic to wider shots, giving his cinematography little room to breathe. While clearly inspired by intense shaky cam action films, I wish he would have taken more inspiration from Bollywood musicals, which understand that we want some room to take in the full choreography and get a sense of the space these characters are in. Plus, there are definitely some pacing issues. Unsurprising for a film that has faced so many challenges on set and in the edit. Nearly everything leading up to the first brawl in the nightclub is exhilarating, but then the film grinds to an awkward halt in the middle, eventually picking back up for a tremendous third-act conclusion. That isn't to say that Monkey Man's second act is boring or uninteresting, though. In fact, it is here that we find the film's most interesting political critiques. I only wish they had been better integrated within the flow of the film and were not subject to unfortunate compromises. Reflecting on his position in Indian society, at one point Kid says, "They don't even notice us. They are living up there and we're stuck down here. That's not living." Monkey Man owes a lot to the Indonesian action film The Raid, which follows a police officer as he scales a multi-story apartment building to get to a gang leader at the top. Patel echoes this basic setup with his nightclub, as Kid first must work his way up from the kitchens at the bottom to the luxury spaces at the top where his enemies are. It's a great action film setup, but Patel also uses it to critique both the class structure of capitalism — we all worship one god, the Indian rupee, Sharlto Copley's ring announcer says early in the film — and the class structure entrenched in Indian society. As mentioned before, the saffron orange of Patel's fictional political party, before it was sloppily changed to red in post, was an overt reference to India's ruling BJP party. Led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the party is defined by its social conservatism, neoliberal economic policies, ultranationalism, and religious zealotry in the form of Hindutva, which seeks to establish Hindu hegemony. In Monkey Man's world, Guru Shakti is leading a very similar political party's rise to power on the eve of a national election. And as Patel grows to understand the Guru's role in the raid on his village, he also starts to see himself as just one of many who has been hurt by his right-wing project. In the second act, Kid is rescued by a group of transgender people, or more specifically, third gender, known as Hijra. As has happened under Modi's government, this group has been brutally targeted by Shakti's followers, and the temple that had become their sanctuary is under threat of seizure, something Kid is obviously familiar with. It is here that he trains for his final confrontation, and connects his struggle to theirs, transforming this revenge tale into one of liberation. Not all of this is communicated perfectly, though. The most glaring issue is the film's attempt to reclaim Hindu iconography from Hindu nationalism without acknowledging the reactionary movement's main target, Muslims. While the inclusion of the Hijra people is a welcome radical statement of solidarity with that community and other queer folks, Muslims in India have suffered greatly under the Modi government. Whether a Muslim perspective was always excluded from this narrative or was cut by the studios from fear of alienating conservative viewers in India, it was a cowardly omission that blunts the film's impact. The struggles of queer folks, the poor, the lower castes, and Muslims are all linked, and a truly liberatory film would have had space for solidarity with all. Still, despite these problems, Monkey Man manages to be a radical breath of fresh air in the action genre, which is filled with many films entirely uninterested in making any political statement at all. It serves as a warning against charismatic conmen who use religion to gain power and demonize other groups. It shines a light on the Hijra people and their struggle for liberation, in addition to giving them badass representation in the action genre. It has a basic but appreciated critique of capitalism and the caste system in India. Plus, at a time in which it's rare to hear a ton of criticism of the Modi-led government in Indian media, and especially the Indian film industry, Patel's decision to make an action revenge film about trying to kill blatantly BJP-coded villains is pretty radical. Monkey Man is a little shaggy, and its political critiques don't all come together, but its heart is definitely in the right place. Plus, with Patel's charisma as an actor, some stellar action sequences, a cast full of Indian acting legends, a fun soundtrack, wonderfully colorful imagery, and a fiery political message, it's an easy film to recommend, and a promising start to Patel's career as a director. I'm giving Monkey Man 3.5 out of 5 stars. It is currently available on Peacock and VOD. Nearly a decade after the release of Mad Max Fury Road, director George Miller has returned with its prequel, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. It's the 5th film in his dystopian mythology, which started as an apocalyptic tale because it was easier to shoot that way, and has now become not only the pinnacle of action filmmaking, but an expansive world filled with ever weirder and more unique characters. There aren't many films that I would call perfect, but Mad Max Fury Road is one of them. Seeing it for the first time in theaters in 2015 was one of the most exhilarating and mind-blowing experiences I've ever had. It's one of the greatest action films ever made, period. So I'll just get this out of the way because Furiosa doesn't deserve to have those kind of expectations on it. Miller's prequel is not Fury Road. It is very good, but it is a much different film. While Fury Road is a high-octane thrill ride told over 3 days, Furiosa is a grand epic that spans many years in the life of its young protagonist. It is both a bit more silly at times and far more contemplative than Fury Road, ruminating on storytelling itself and the ways we shape our own mythologies. It is also admittedly a bit more rough around the edges, with slight pacing issues, some sections that feel strangely truncated, and more noticeable VFX. But even still, Furiosa is the rare, satisfying prequel that manages to add to Fury Road's greatness, and once again proves George Miller's action filmmaking prowess. The film begins in the mythical Green Place that Furiosa spoke of in Fury Road, an idyllic forest sanctuary that recalls the Garden of Eden and is inhabited by a seemingly matriarchal society. An adolescent Furiosa, played by an impressive Elila Brown, has ventured to the edges of this oasis and happens upon a group of motorcycle bandits. After attempting to sabotage their escape, she is discovered and taken away into the desert wasteland, setting up one of the most thrilling sequences in the entire film. Furiosa's mother, played brilliantly by Charlie Fraser, who should be cast in many more action films, chases after the bandits, hoping to prevent them from telling others about the Green Place and rescue her daughter. But despite her mother's incredible acumen with a rifle and some quick-thinking sabotage by Furiosa, they make it back to the bandit camp, where we are introduced to Miller's new villain, Dementus, played by Chris Hemsworth. It's one of the best performances I've ever seen from Hemsworth, as he lends this leader of a marauding motorcycle gang with an imposing aura, hilariously ridiculous accent, and a gleeful psychosis we expect from the villains of the Mad Max wasteland. Dementis is not just a gang leader, but has styled himself as an almost religious figure, draped in a white shroud, and insists at times for others to refer to him as Dr. Dementis, which may have been his profession before the world fell, or may just be part of his own myth-making. Despite killing the remaining bandit before he can tell Dementis about the Green Place, Furiosa's mother is captured and killed, and the young girl is forced to stay with the Wasteland gang. Later, when the gang captures Gastown near Immortan Joe's citadel, she finds herself in the Fury Road villain's service after being traded in intense negotiations over the precious Guzzolene. We then jump several years into the future to finally meet Anya Taylor-Joy's version of the character. Working as a mechanic, an older Furiosa still dreams of returning to the Green Place and getting her revenge on the man who killed her mother. If Fury Road was Miller's stripped-down version of the Odyssey, Furiosa is his Iliad, complete with a war between a king and a warrior, and though it is not mentioned in the Iliad, Furiosa literally becomes a Trojan horse in Immortan Joe's midst. But Miller's examination of mythology also extends to the stories that his characters tell themselves and others, stories that shift over time, as myths often do. We see this shift visually with Dementis, as his once white shroud turns blood red, shedding the dubious story of a nomadic leader seeking to deliver people from the cruelties of the wasteland and embracing that cruelty to become the warlord of Gastown. For Furiosa, surviving the cruelties of the wasteland will depend on shaping her own narrative as well. When Dementis passes her off to Immortan Joe, she is seen as just another womb to produce children. So she buries the old Furiosa and passes herself off as a male mechanic. Eventually, she again remakes herself as a war rig operator as she prepares her escape. These are the myths she must tell others in order to achieve her goals of revenge and homecoming. But Miller also recontextualizes those goals, and in the process, our conception of Fury Road. Much like in Dev Patel's Monkey Man, our heroine may be seeking revenge in Furiosa, but in Fury Road, she is seeking something far more powerful: liberation, both for herself and the other women trapped in this patriarchal wasteland. Her response to the cruelties of this fallen world is ultimately solidarity with her fellow women. It all adds up to a powerful, epic film that uses these reflections of mythology in concert with Mad Max's other persistent themes: climate apocalypse and the evils of the patriarchy. Still, the film is not fully paced properly, with certain sections feeling like a drag, and even though the film is nearly 2.5 hours long, at times it feels like we are missing material. Another pass over the script probably could have polished the existing material and added more breathing room in needed places. I would have also added some more dialogue for the talented Anya Taylor-Joy as well. Plus, though there is plenty of impressive VFX work here, it just isn't integrated as seamlessly as it was in Fury Road. And there is a greater reliance on digital effects over practical effects and stunt work. Given the decision probably came from a concern for safety, though, I can't ding Miller too much for that. In the end, Furiosa is a fitting addition to the Mad Max series. It features supremely entertaining action sequences, including an impressive war rig fight that adds flying enemies to the equation, some truly excellent performances by its cast, including Anya Taylor-Joy, who perfectly captures the essence of Charlize Theron, delivers bold, heavily saturated imagery that makes the film feel like an epic fable, and also includes some incredible new character names, including Scrotus, Pissboy, Octoboss, and Chumbucket. You gotta love George Miller. I'm giving Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, 4 out of 5 stars. It is currently out in theaters. That will do it for this episode of 2 Tickets Please. You can find more of my written content at 2ticketsplease.substack.com. Thanks for watching.